Okay, so let's keep going with DSMA 7. This is part 2. We're going to keep factoring what we call trinomials. So there are 3 terms. Now, if you want some more practice, you can go to Khan Academy. .org, and in the search engine you can put factoring, you can put factor trinomials, and they have both videos with some problems worked out, and they also have practice problems that you can work on, and then they show a video also. So that's a really good one. There's also Purple Math. If you Google Purple Math, and then also search for factoring or factoring trinomials, they have a lot of problems as well. Okay, so we have x squared minus 11x plus 18. So the very first thing we're going to do is check and see if we can pull anything out of there, if we can pull a greatest common factor. But there's nothing because we have a 1 in front, so there are no numbers in common except 1. There's no extra x in there, so we can't pull out an x. So this is ready to go. Now, we do have a negative in the middle. However, we still have a positive at the end. All right, so let me show you. We're still going to do our boxes where we want 2 numbers that when we add them together, we get the negative 11 that's in the middle. You have to pull the sign. And when we multiply them together, we're going to get 18. So let's take a look at 18. We could have 1 times 18. We could have 2 times 9. We also could have 3 times 6. And that looks like that's it. Okay, so all I did was start dividing. We always have to try the 1 times the number, and then I see if 2 goes in. And I see if 3 goes in, then I go see if 4 goes in, and I keep going just to make sure that I'm grabbing all of the factors of 18. Okay, so now that we've done that, now we want to look at these and see which one of these sum to negative 11. Well, none of them are going to sum to a negative. We're going to have to take care of that in a minute. But which one of them sum to the 11? Well, the first one's not going to work because if we add those together, we get 19. The second one, we get 11. That works. Let's keep going. And then 3 plus 6 is going to give us 9. So that's not going to work. All right, so we're going to grab the 2 and the 9. And sure enough, 2 times 9 gives us 18. But 2 plus 9 gives me positive 11, not negative 11. So I'm going to switch the signs. Negative 2 plus negative 9 would give me the negative 11, so that's good. And then negative 2 times negative 9 would give me a positive 18 still. And so I'm good to go. So as long as this last sign is a positive, then either both of your terms are going to be positive or both terms are going to be negative. And the way you know is by the number or the sign in the middle. All right, so we're going to put x minus 2, and then x minus 9. Now, again, the order doesn't matter. You can put x minus 9 and then x minus 2. All right, let's check our work. That is actually the answer, but let's check our work. Okay, so we get x squared are the first terms. The outer terms, we get negative 9x. The inner terms, we get negative 2x. And finally, the outer terms, we get 18. So this is why we practiced FOIL, so that we would be able to check this important work that we're doing with factoring. Then if we combine the middle terms, we get the original answer. And so we are good to go. All right, these are the trickiest when there's a negative at the end. So I have x squared minus 14x minus 32. And so the problem is going to be that I have one number that's going to be positive and one number that's going to be negative. Otherwise, I'm not going to get this negative 32 at the end. So I still have that. I have two numbers that when I add them together, I need to get negative 14. And when I multiply them together, I need to get negative 32. So I'm going to come over here because this one's going to be a little bit trickier. And I'm going to write every different way, which is a lot, that I could get negative 32. All right, so I could get negative 1 times 32 or 1 times negative 32, right? Then I could have negative 2 times 16, because 2 goes in 16 times, or I could have 2 times negative 16. Now this is going to go on and on. I'm not going to do all of them because I want to show you something, right? And there's more. I would have to keep going. I think it's, well, yeah. Would I? No, I might be done. Oi, 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 oi. What else would I have? Because I don't have 5, 6, 7. I do have 8. Yeah, no, I'm done. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's go ahead and add these all together in this column. All right, so this is every one of these groups of numbers multiplies to give me negative 32. But if I add them, if I add this first one, negative 1 plus 32 would give me 31. Well, that's not going to work because I want negative 14. 1 times negative 32 would give me negative 31. That one's not going to work. Then I have negative 2 plus 16. Well, that's close. It gave me positive 14, but I want negative 14. So the next one, 2 plus negative 16 gives me negative 14. So that is probably my two numbers, but let's just check. So we have negative 4 plus 8 would give me 4, and 4 plus negative 8 would give me negative 4. So it looks like I want 2 and negative 16. So let's check them in here. I have 2 and negative 16. When I multiply them together, I get negative 32, so that works. And then I have 2 and negative 16 here. When I add them together, I get negative 14. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a positive 2, so that would be x plus 2. And then I'm going to take x minus 16. Okay, so that's actually my answer. That is factored. But let's go down here and check. We're going to FOIL. These especially you need to check because it's really easy to put the sign in the wrong place. If you put the negative with the 2, you would get the wrong answer on this one. So the first two terms gives me x squared. Outer is negative 16x. Inner is 2x. And finally the last gives me negative 32. And then I have like terms in the middle. And that gives me the negative 14x that I need and the negative 32 at the end. So I am good to go. So these are a little trickier. You do have to watch for those signs. All right, let's try another one. Oh, this looks terrible. 3x squared minus 3x minus 126. Those are big number. 126 is a big number. I've got a 3 out front. So the first thing we have to do is look for a greatest common factor. So do you know the trick about big numbers and whether they're divisible by 3? If you take the 126 and you add the digits together, so you add 1 plus 2 plus 6, that gives me 9. If that is divisible by 3, then the larger number is divisible by 3. It only works for 3s. It's magic. Okay, so 126 is divisible by 3. So let's go ahead and pull out the greatest common factor. So the first term divided by 3 gives me x squared. The second term divided by 3 gives me negative x. And then the last term divided by 3 is going to give me 42. That is a much nicer number to deal with when I have to come over here and find the factors than the 126. All right, so I'm still going to do the same thing. Over here, I want, I'm going to add them together to give me, remember there's a 1 sitting here, a -1. I'm going to multiply them together to give me -42. Okay, so let's come over here and take a look at -42. All right, so I could have -1 times 42, or I could have 1 times -42. I could have -2 times 21, or 2 times -21. Not quite there yet. 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work, 5 doesn't work, 6 doesn't, 7 works. Oh, 6 works. Yep. Right? I have a -6 times +7, and you can use your calculator and just start dividing. Take 42 and divide by 2, divide by 3, divide by 4. Keep going. Oh, wait a minute. I missed 3. 3 does work. Ooh, I missed 3. Let me put it in there. So I have -3 times 14, and I have 3 times -14. Oof. The problem is I knew the answer, and so I was headed to the answer, but it is difficult. So if you're using your calculator, just see if you get in, if it goes in evenly. So divide by 3, it goes in evenly. Divide by 4 doesn't work. Divide by 5 doesn't work. Divide by 6 goes in 7 times. Okay, so now that we've done all of that, we need to go in and check if we add these numbers together, because we want a -1. Well, the only two that if we add them together give us -1 are down here, right? If we add them, we would get -1 if we add. Okay, so we're going to grab 6 and -7. If we multiply them together, we get -42. And then we're going to add 6 and -7 and get -1. So the signs are really important, because if we had grabbed the opposite signs, if we'd grabbed -6 times +7, then we would get a +1 in the middle, and we don't want that. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to put x plus 6 and x minus 7. And we are good to go. I'm going to let you check that one. You would FOIL, and then you would multiply by the 3. Usually what I do is I eyeball the outer and the inner to make sure I have the sign right. So the outer would be the -7x, the inner would be plus 6x, and that would give me a -1x in the middle. If I don't have time to completely check my work, but it's always good to check your work. All right, we keep adding things to you. This is still a trinomial. It says factor the trinomial completely. It's just that they added some y's in on us. Doesn't matter. Our technique is going to be the same, but what we have to remember to do, we're going to have an x in the front, and then we're going to have a y at the end, because we want the y times the y to equal the y squared up here, and then we want our outer and inner terms to both have an x and a y. So I'll check this one and show you what's going on. But what we're worried about first is we've got 40 and 13. So we want two numbers that if we add them together, we get 13. If we multiply them together, we get 40, and we don't have to worry about any signs because we only have positives. So that's good. So let's take a look at 40. We could have 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 3 doesn't work, 4 times 10, 5 times 8. That looks like that's it. And of course, you can stop once you see that it works. Like, even if there were more to go, once you find the one that works, you could stop. So we're going to take 5 and 8, because if we multiply them together, we get 40. If we add them together, we get lucky 13. Okay, but this time it's going to look a little different because we have that y at the end. So we're going to put x plus 5y, and then we're going to put x plus 8y. All right, so that is actually our answer, but let's come down here and check it. I always forget those y's, and so that's why I write it that way as soon as I see it. I go ahead and write the x's and y's without the numbers so that I don't forget the y's when I go to put it in the problem, or the computer, excuse me. All right, so first terms is going to give me x squared. If I multiply the outer terms, I have x times 8 times y. So that'll be 8xy. Remember, with multiplication, order doesn't matter, so I can move those around. Then I have 5 times y times x. So again, it's all multiplication, so I can go ahead and put them in order so that they're alphabetical. Because it's multiplication, I can do that. And then finally on the end, I have 5 times 8 is 40, and y times y gives me y squared. All right, so my middle terms are like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and add those together. 5 plus 8 gives me 13. I'm going to keep the x and the y as it is. And then I have the same answer as my original problem. Right, so up till now, all of our polynomials and trinomials have been in order. We like for our, if we have a single variable, we like for our polynomials to be in order by exponent. So the largest exponent first, and then in ascending order by exponents. Now I get it, when we add another variable, it looks a little bit different, but for, as long as we have one variable, that's how we want it to look. So with this one, we need to go ahead and move this t squared to the front, because otherwise we're going to confuse ourselves with the whole what we have to add to and what we have to multiply. All right, so t squared is first. Then we're going to put the negative 20t. Remember, that's technically to the power. Oops, I did that wrong. I had my plus looking like a t. All right, let me see if I can erase this without having. Sometimes this whiteboard goes crazy on me. Nope, I'm okay. All right. Okay, I want the 8t. So plus 8t, that's t to the 1 power. And then finally negative 20. All right, so the exponents have to be in ascending order. Remember, this is really t to the 1. At the end, we don't have a t. Now I can go ahead and figure out what I'm factoring. So I need two factors that sum to 8 and that their product is negative 20. All right, so let's see what we have down here with negative 20. Now you've probably figured out by now that if the middle term is negative, the larger number is negative. If the middle term is positive, the larger number is positive. Then you don't have to write all those. And that's great if you see that. If you don't see it, write them all out. There's not a problem with that. All right, then I have negative 4 times 5 and 4 times negative 5. All right, so those are all my different factors to get to negative 20. And so now I need to add them up. So this one would give me 19. That doesn't work. Negative 19, 8. Oh, that looks good. I have negative 8, positive 1, negative 1. So it looks like we're going to grab negative 2 and 10. So negative 2 times 10 gives me negative 20. Negative 2 plus 10 gives me 8. So I am good to go. Now, the other thing I always do, and then I start screaming at the computer, is they like to give us other letters, and I'll just put an X back in because I like X. So be careful here. We're going to have t minus 2, and then t plus 10. All right, if that happens on a quiz or a test, let your instructor know, and they'll fix that for you, give you some partial credit at least. I'll give you the whole thing because I do it all the time. I change it to X's. All right, we are good to go. If you check your work, you'll see that we're right because the middle terms, we're going to have negative 2t plus 10t gives us positive 8t, and if we multiply them together, we get the negative 20. All right, lots going on here. So the very first thing we're going to do is try to get rid of that 4 in the front. We're going to try to get these numbers smaller. So at first, now this one nicely told you to factor out the GCF first. Does not always say that. A lot of times it will only say factor, or it'll say factor the trinomial completely. Okay, so we know we can pull a 4 out because all 3 of those numbers are divisible by 4. And then see how there's an extra x here? So we actually can pull an x out as well. So that if we divide the first term by 4x, we would get x squared. If we divide the second one, we get negative 7x. And then finally on the end, we get 12. Okay, now the 4x out front has nothing to do with what we're going to factor in the middle. That 4x is just going to hang out front, but it does have to stay there all the way through until you type it into the computer. But we are not going to look at it as far as what we're factoring on the inside. Okay, so we have the same idea. We've got, if we add the 2 terms together, we get negative 7. If we multiply them together, we get 12. Now, when we first look at 12, we have 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. So 3 times 4, if I add it together, it does give me 7, but I want negative 7, right? And so I'm going to have to change this to negative 3 times negative 4, because negative 3 times negative 4 would still give me the positive 12, but then when I add them together, I'll get the negative 7. So you just have to watch your signs. Signs get all of us, and so you have to find a way to keep track. This is how I keep track, but it's up to you how you do that. All right, so we've got the 4x out front. Then we've got x minus 3, and we have x minus 4. If we check our work real quick, if we don't worry about the 4x out front, we've got our outside term would be the negative 4x. The inside would be negative 3x. So that would give us the negative 7x in the middle. And then negative 3 times negative 4 would give us the 12. At that point, we'd have to distribute the 4x if we were completely checking our work. Okay, last one for this section. Again, we always, even if the problem doesn't say it, we always want to check and see if there's a greatest common factor that we can pull out of here. So if we look across the numbers, we have 2, 16, and 38. Those are all even, and therefore we can pull a 2 to the front. Then we have x squared, x, and no x on the last term. So we can't pull an x out because we would have to have an x in this last term in order to pull an x out. But we can pull these y's out, right? There's an extra y all the way across. So let's go ahead and pull that one out to the front as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is divide each of these by y. The first one we have 2 over 2 would give us 1. We would have the x squared, and then y over y would give us 1. So we're just left with x squared. And the next one we'd have 16 over 2, so that's 8. The x will stay put, and then y over y would give me 1. And then finally, 38 divided by 2 is 19, I think. Uh-oh. Is that right? 15 and 4. Yep. And then we pulled the y out of there. Okay, so we divided out, or we pulled the greatest common factor, however you want to word that. We pulled out 2y from all of it. That gave us something that looks a little nicer. It left me with x squared plus 8x minus 19. Now, we haven't had one of these yet. If I come over here and I try to get two numbers that if I add them together, I get 8, and I multiply them together, I get negative 19. I have a little problem because negative 19 is a prime number. We can put 1 in there, right? We could do negative 1 times 19. We could do 1 times negative 19, but nothing else goes into 19 because it's a prime number. 2 doesn't work, 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work, 5 doesn't. I mean, you could go all the way up to 19 and none of it works. Okay, this is a prime number. That does not mean this polynomial is prime, but the 19 is a prime number. And so although we could get this second part to work, there's no way to get two numbers to sum to 8, because if I add these two together, if I add negative 1 plus 19, I get 18. If I add 1 plus negative 19, I get negative 18. What is going on with my stylus here? Okay, so I cannot factor the inside, but that doesn't mean this is prime. All right, so let's say this. Cannot factor further. But since we already pulled a greatest common factor, we already factored, right? We factored out the GCF. So we're going to go ahead and put this in. We're not going to say it's prime. We're going to go ahead and put it in to the first box because we did do a little bit of factoring. Now, if they had just given us the x squared plus 8x minus 19, then we would say it was prime because there's no way to factor it. But since we were able to get that greatest common factor out, we can go ahead and write this problem with it factored.